Hello and welcome back to the Nature Garden podcast with me, Carl Steinson, and the weekending show team from Lionheart Radio. It's a chance to take a wander down the garden path and country lane with the birds and the bees and the flowers and trees, and an opportunity to hear stories from the past and the present. In this episode, we're marking the change of the season from summer into autumn and catching up on seasonal reports from our correspondents. Tom Pattinson is looking at the importance of short and long day flowering and how the light affects our plants. We're catching up on many of the comings and goings of birds over the recent weeks with Tom Cadwallander, who also has news of a rare visitor. And creepy crawly fans unite! Spider fan Steve Lowe is here to tell us all about amorous spiders and their attraction to our bathrooms. And we've got more great top tips from Tom and some jobs for the week, all coming up on the Nature Garden podcast. And it's great to be back. Summer has been and just gone, and Tom Pattinson has been taking stock and considering the elements of success in the garden. Hello there, Tom. Where's it gone? How's it going, sir?
Hello, Carl. It's good to be back and sharing my gardening thoughts with anyone who's prepared to listen. I've been enjoying myself the last month or so in the garden, shutting off from all of the nasty things that are happening in the world, aware of them, of course, but the garden is always pleasant for me. And you know, some people will enjoy the summer in the garden, and then when it comes to autumn, say, oh, well, that's it, put the tools away. Oh, if they do that, they're missing out on such a lot. Each season has its attractions in the garden, and this is because plants throughout the world have adapted themselves to surviving different times of year, spring, summer, autumn, winter. The main stimuli for that, two main stimuli as far as I'm concerned, are the amount of light and the amount of warmth. Water and other things play a part as well, of course, but it's the changing light conditions and the changing levels of temperature that affect plants mainly, and none more so than in the summer to autumn period. In gardening, we talk about short day flowering plants, long day flowering plants, and neutral day flowering plants. Let me explain. The long day flowering plants are those that flower in summertime, when there's 12 or more hours of daylight within a 24-hour period. The short day flowering plants are those that start to flower, form buds, and entertain us when the number of hours in a 24-hour period fall below 12 hours. And of course, the neutral will accept either. Let me give you two or three examples. For example, a long day flowering vegetable, a beetroot and a carrot. Sprouts and cabbages, which are busy developing in my garden at the moment, are not necessarily short day, they are neutral, and they'll accept either number of hours. They just grow on through winter and of course tolerate the cool conditions as well. The flowers of spring and the flowers of autumn are short day plants. And think about it, in spring they are shorter days until we really get into the summer period, and in autumn we've gone those shorter days again. The short day flowering plants, apart from the spring and autumn bulbs, etc., are chrysanthemums, poinsettia, which we enjoy over the Christmas period, and of course the Christmas cactus. I'm dealing with the chrysanthemums at the moment. Chrysanthemums tend to blend into two sections. One is the earlier chrysanthemums, longer day flowering plants, which are generally flowering from July, August, and they go into September. And the short day flowering chrysanthemums are those that are just starting to form buds outside now because the hours of daylight have fallen just below that 12-hour period. And they've been out in pots in the garden. I'm going to bring them into the cold greenhouse, and they will flower up to Christmas and a little bit beyond. Short, neutral and long day flowering plants. Changes in the garden at the moment are quite spectacular. One or two of the early shrubs are starting to show a little change of colour. Now, the full colour change might not come till the end of October into November, but it's beginning. And that's because falling daylight hours and falling temperature. And this causes chemical reactions within the plant, and those chemical reactions lead to, in the case of leaf fall, into the closing off of food supply to a leaf. First of all, the tree or the shrub reabsorbs any goodness left in the leaf back into the plant's body itself, and then it cuts loose that leaf and it floats down to ground. And of course, we don't waste any of that material because it can be composted. Leaf mould is just a brilliant substance to work with and so good for plants. And at the moment, now that we have moved into autumn, there's quite a lot of dead plant material on perennials which have been flowering all summer, the long day flowering plants. That dead material has to be chopped down and composted, not burnt on a bonfire, because bonfires are bad for the environment and they're bad for good relations with neighbours. So I never have a bonfire at all these days. I have so in the past, I confess, but everything good brown material to go into the composting facility. Autumn has arrived. I'll mention one or two of the highlights of it shortly.
Well, it's definitely got a bit nippier this week, and a lot has happened in between the start of August and now. I think I told you that the house martins fledged all successfully. Wonderful to see that happening. Well, Tom Cadwallander from the British Trust for Ornithology has been taking notes from the coast and fields and reports on some of the comings and goings in the world of birds.
Where has summer gone to? My goodness me. Summer has definitely left in these last few days, and we've seen it significantly turn into autumn, and winter's not too far over the horizon. But for some species, some bird species, autumn migration started a wee while ago. Some wading birds from the high Arctic have been passing through from sort of end of June into July, and kind of using the Northumberland, if you like, as a staging post. But those birds are on migration and they're well through. But for a lot of us, we're seeing now the real difference. A lot of the birds which we recognise as our summer visitors, you know, the likes of willow warblers and chiffchaffs, swifts and swallows, we're seeing those birds sort of clear out. In fact, swifts left, must be 2 weeks ago. I haven't seen one for the last sort of 10 days, and they'll be well on their way to South Africa. And swallows and house martins are moving through now as well. We're just seeing this kind of the tail end of their migration, and these birds will be a bit further north, coming from a bit further north, sort of heading south. But some of the tales of these birds and their journeys are just phenomenal, really. You think about the kind of commoner breeding bird like a sedge warbler. It regularly comes in as a 12 grams. It'll be about 5 inches long. It lives in reed beds. And prior to migration, though, it will double its body weight to just over 20 grams. And it will fly continuously until it burns off all of that fat. And then it'll stop for a few days at a good spot and feed up before it continues its onward migration and carries on until it gets south of the Sahara, which is quite phenomenal when you think about it. So we're seeing all these birds which have been north for the breeding season, and they're all clearing out and heading south. But by the same token, we're seeing birds which are on passage. We're seeing birds which have kind of bred in the high Arctic, something like a knot, which is a wading bird. It's about the size of a blackbird. It's got longer legs and a different shaped bill. But this bird is a bird which breeds in sort of Arctic Canada, and will fly through the UK and stop off and might even overwinter in some places in the UK, but it could be destined for South Africa. And the knot, which is sometimes known as the red knot because of its breeding plumage. It's an orangey or reddy sort of brick red colour, and that will mould through into quite a grey plumage for the autumn winter. But this bird can travel kind of thousands of kilometres each year on its migration. But these birds are kind of passage migrants, so they're moving through. But we're seeing the first of the winter birds coming in. Just on the Alne Estuary here, where I spend a lot of time, the teal numbers are gradually climbing. They have been for the last month, and I'm counting 170 up to 200 birds here. Teal are the smallest of the ducks that we have, and they're about the size of twice the size of a blackbird, perhaps half the size of a mallard. But they're beautiful little things, and in the breeding plumage, the male has this russety red head with this great sort of swathe of green through the eye. It is quite pretty, and in the wing it has this little green flash in the speculum, which is the little portion of the wing just on its secondaries. But towards the back end of the bird, it has this little kind of yellowy triangle, and that's kind of how you will sort them out. But they're the smallest of the duck that we have coming here. Their numbers are building. But also we've got widgeon, and they're starting to build now. Widgeon are a little bit bigger, and the males have got this nice sort of pale yellow shield above its bill, and they're russetly red as well in plumage. Both of these species are breeding in the high Siberian Arctic, and they're coming here to spend their winter. And they kind of as the season changes, they'll be put off to head south on their southerly migration. And they're coming here, and the numbers are starting to build, so they'll be building quite nicely for the winter. And Lindisfarne National Nature Reserve is one of the great places in the country to see widgeon and teal. And the numbers of widgeon can build up to something like 40,000, which is quite phenomenal, really, on those mudflats. But there are other birds which are going to be coming here, and they're coming through on migration too. Geese species. I know we're seeing greylags and Canada geese around, and these birds are kind of largely feral, and they have a little bits of migration in here, but they're generally sort of quite sedentary. But there is a grey goose species which is highly migratory, and it's the pink-footed goose, and we're starting to see them come through now, and it's a harbinger of certainly winter, without a doubt, and they'll be coming through quite high, and they've got quite a high-pitched kind of call they make, quite high-pitched honking, not like the kind of low, really deep honk of a greylag. There's quite a high-pitched one. But these pink feet, or pink-footed goose as it's given its full common name, grey goose, but it has a much smaller bill than the greylag. The greylag's got a big orange hooter on it, whereas the pinkfoot is got quite a dainty little dark bill with a pink tip to it. And as its name suggests, its legs and feet are pink. And these are coming through quite high, and these are birds that are coming down from Arctic Greenland through Iceland into the UK. And some will spend time on Druridge Bay, but a lot of them will go on and have their winter at the North Norfolk coast. And they're coming through quite high, and you can hear them from quite a long way off. And if you get your eye onto them, you can just pick out the thin strand, the thread of in the sky of them, and they're flying in a kind of a roughly a V formation. And that's quite evocative for me, and it kind of just gives a nice little stirring in my stomach when I hear them. I think it's fantastic.
We're celebrating the start of the new season, and for me, seeing the combine harvesters make way for ploughs is one of those moments. A change of colour and smell from green to gold and brown and hay to soil. Tom Pattinson loves the changes, so come on, let's get in the autumn mood with him.
I like autumn. Takes me back to school days. Love it as an adult. Season of mists and mellow fruitfulness, close bosom friend of the maturing sun, etc. Harvest festival services with all that produce, giving thanks for the stuff that's grown throughout the year. It is about vegetable storage, it is about fruits, and that's what I've been doing recently in the garden. It's just a pleasure to see the vegetables, sound potatoes, carrots, etc., and put them into storage there for winter, throughout the winter. Oh, it's the dream, isn't it? And the fruit. What a crop of plums we had this year, despite the fact that it's had one of its off years, the Victoria plum. Still a good crop. And a few pears. Put the pears into a cupboard. They were hard when they were picked, and they've softened off a bit, ripened a bit in the cupboard, and we're just starting to enjoy them now. That's the conference pear. The tree's just about maybe 8 years old, but it's starting to mature. Love that. And best of all, those apples. They are just in abundance this year. I'm storing them at the moment. Discovery, eating Discovery, the first beautiful red dessert one, which has arrived on the scene about 3 weeks ago. It was first ripened, followed by James Grieve, and there are the Egremont Russet is following it up, not quite ready yet, and of course then Braeburn, which brings up the rear. There's lovely big fruits of Braeburn, super dessert apples. There's Lord Derby, which is the a cooking or culinary apple, and others along there. I've got a Crimson Bramley. It's doing well, as well as the Bramley seedling. Just love the crop of apples and storing them in trays in the garage at the moment. And when I walk into the garage, even now, they've just been stored for a couple of weeks, some of them. I walk in there, that fragrance of ripening apples greets me every morning when I go in. No petrol fumes, just the fragrance of the ripening apples. Ethylene gas given off. Just beautiful. That's just the beginning of it. I mean, there's so many ornamental features out there as well. The crab apples, marlus, ornamental. The birds will eat them later. They're leaving them for the moment. They're just beautiful to look at. Very handy as well. A crab apple in amongst your cultivated apples. They help pollinate them when they're flowering about the May period. I've got some gorgeous flowers out at the moment. Still, Lavatera's been there all of the summer. It's baby Barnsley, the dwarf type of Barnsley, and it is still flowering strongly. I've got a repeat on the Choicia ternata, that gorgeous Peruvian, Mexican Peruvian orange blossom commonly called. It is beautiful at the moment, that evergreen. It's repeat flowering, which is a pleasant surprise. Little cyclamen, hedropholium, gorgeous little cyclamen at ground level. It's out there flowering as well. And Cosmos has just gone on and on. I love the filigree type foliage of it against the, it's in a tricky border near the front wall of the house, dry at times, but by gosh, it just thrives there. And lovely flowers on them, just continuing. It's a fairly hardy annual actually, and it just proves it by flowering up to the frost period. Rudbeckia's out there. Rudbeckia, gorgeous, Goldsturm, that's the perennial variety. And we have some annual Rudbeckia out there as well. They'll go onto the compost when they're finished flowering, but they're still flowering. Rudbeckia marmalade, for example. And you know, autumn crocus is out as well. Not the crocus, it's not the crocus of spring. This is the autumn crocus, colchicum. It's called. I don't handle it. It contains a poisonous alkaloid, colchicine. So, but it's gorgeous to look at. Delightful to look at. The brassicas are just getting into their stride now. The Brussels sprouts, purple sprouting broccoli, just planted out about 2 weeks ago. The spring cabbages, and they're looking strong too. Everything is coming together, and whoever said gardening was finished for the year when summer ended is totally wrong. I'm enjoying my autumn garden, and you should be enjoying yours.
You may have noticed the return of a spider or two in the bath, but please don't wash them down the plug hole or squash them. Steve Lowe from the Northumberland Rivers Trust and Naturally Northumbria is here to shine a light on the web of love that entangles all of us at some time, including our leggy arachnid friends.
Now, I bet you can associate yourself with this particular scene. It's coming on autumn, it's getting dark outside, it's getting cold outside, and you're sitting in your house, nice and warm, with a cup of tea, your feet up, and a biscuit, and you're watching the telly, and out of the corner of your eye you see something move. And away it goes across the carpet, this long-legged thing that just disappears behind a piece of furniture. Next morning when you get up, you go for a bath or a shower, and there he is lying in the bath with his long legs and his hairy body, and you don't know what to do because your house has suddenly apparently been invaded by house spiders. In fact, Britain's biggest spiders, the Tegenaria species, have actually made themselves at home in your own little comfy abode. Don't worry, they're just looking for love. What you see generally are the males who are actually looking for a female to mate with. They'll have been there all year in your house, or at least in your garden. They don't necessarily come into the house because it's cold outside, but they do spend a lot of time in the garden. They're happy in both of them. But at this time of year, the females start to get in the mood for love, and they start to develop a pheromone, which is a sort of chemical cocktail, a bit like Chanel No. 5, ladies, but this one's only aimed at the spiders. And the males come looking for the female. Now they have to be a little bit careful because the female could well eat him, and he knocks very gently on her web, which is probably in your garage or behind a bit of wardrobe or something like that, before they actually get together and start to create babies. Now personally, I'm not really worried about that, and I'd go out my way to make sure that any spider I find actually finds its way outside without any damage. A lot of people are particularly scared of spiders. Now I will have to say there's not really any real reason for you to be frightened of them. It's something that's in our psyche. But there's very few spiders in this country that could actually bite. We just really have this unnatural fear and loathing of them. Now, if you look at it, there are over 600 species of spider in the UK. So coming across them isn't really going to be that difficult. They're all over the place. But these ones, particularly because of their long legs, actually create a bit more of a problem for us. So anyway, what's going on? Well, male and female spiders actually live a solitary lifestyle as they grow up. They actually have a hard exoskeleton, which is like a suit of armour, and they shed this throughout the year in a series of skin molts. But at this particular time of year, they're actually at their peak condition, as it were, and they have this final molt. The males usually have lost a bit of body mass by this time, and it makes them look to have even longer legs than normal. And to be fair, longer limbs are actually useful because you've got to cover a lot of ground to find a mate, despite being on the web. I think a lot of us actually can have some sympathy with that as well, having tried internet dating myself. Anyway, the males also develop enlarged pedipalps, which is the bits that you'll see on the front of their legs, and these are used for mating and transferring the sperm. The female has to have a fully developed what's called epigyne, which is the structure on the underside of their abdomen to receive those pedipalps and sperms. So effectively, the shape of the pedipalp is absolutely essential because it's like a lock and key, and without which the males and females can't actually reproduce. Now, before it gets that far, in fact, the male has to find a willing mate, and that's where we come into contact with them as they're scurrying around looking for one. Now, you might be wondering why they end up in the bath. Well, the secret for that is not really a secret at all, is that although they can go for quite a long time without food, they do need to drink. And they go into bathrooms after someone's had a shower, and then they can't get out of the bath because the surfaces are too shiny and difficult for them to get a grip on. They don't come up through the plug hole, which is a common theory, and anyone with a basic knowledge of plumbing would know that they'd have to hold their nose and hold their breath and swim up through it, which is, well, basically they just can't do it. So that's the time at which you're most likely to come across them. And rather than turning the tap on and washing them away or squashing them, give them a helping hand, get them into a glass or something like that. And, if you have to, let them out of the back door or the front door even. Don't kill them, for goodness sake, because they actually have a fantastic job that they do on keeping pests down for us. And folks, we're losing enough biodiversity as it is without having to do that sort of thing. So put your arms around a nice big hairy spider this autumn and everyone will be happy.
This is the Nature Garden Podcast with Carl Steinson, Tom Pattinson, Tom Cadwallander and Steve Lowe.
An unusual visitor flew into the area recently, and Tom Cadwallander from the British Trust for Ornithology has news of this bunny migrant that ended up far from home. And he's waxing lyrical about the wonders of waders.
Great excitement last week. I got a WhatsApp message to tell me about a buff-breasted sandpiper that had been found feeding on the shore at Seaton Point near Boomer. Buff-breasted sandpipers are so exciting. This is a bird from the Americas, and it breeds in the very, very high Arctic, and it winters in the short grassland of southern South America. So it's way off course. And it's only ever been seen sort of 10, 12 times before in Northumberland. So there was a lot of interest in this bird. And there'd been a few others turned up on the west coast of Britain and been brought across by the latest of the hurricanes that have kind of tracking their way across the North Atlantic. So this bird should have been heading south, down into South America, but it's turned up here in Northumberland. Great excitement. And the buff-breasted sandpiper is quite a pretty bird, actually. And as the name suggests, buff-breasted, and has a buff breast, but it's more than that, though. It's only about the size of a big house sparrow, and it has quite long legs, and they're pale, yellowy, sort of greeny coloured, and the bill is dark. But the head is quite nicely round. But actually, it's buff-coloured all the way, all through its back, but it has obviously got a buff breast. But you look at its back, at its mantle, and there's some beautiful sort of edgings to the back feathers, and they're kind of really sort of pale-edged mantle feathers with dark centres to them. And it really stands out. And this bird is quite dainty because it's got quite long legs compared to its body. But it's feeding in amongst about 400 dunlin. Dunlin is probably the commonest or the most numerous of the wading birds that we have, and dunlin is not a particularly big wading bird. It's about the size of a house sparrow. So it's in amongst 400 of those. Plus there's 20 or 30 knot, and knot are perhaps about sort of another third again bigger, and they're much grey apart from the adults, which are brick red coloured, but they're changing out of that sort of breeding plumage now. But there's also turnstones there. Turnstones are really quite evocative species, and one of the species why the Northumberland coast has been designated as a special protection area and a Ramsar site. But anyway, all these birds are feeding together on the wrack, the seaweed that has been blown ashore by the prolonged kind of easterly and northeasterly winds that we've had. And there's big piles of it on the beach at Boomer, right down through Seaton Point in the north end of Alnmouth Bay. And these birds are feeding on the eggs of the whelks and the maggots or the larvae of the sandflies. So there's a huge amount of food available there. And as the wrack, bladder wrack or any of the other species of wrack and kelp, as they rot, there's more and more insects will kind of lay their eggs on it. And a lot of the sea creatures a lot of their eggs will land on it as well. And it's a great food resource for all of these waders. And they're feeding so voraciously, and they're quite approachable, these birds as well. And if you sit still, then they'll come very, very close to you. And it's quite exciting to see them doing this sort of thing. But a friend pointed out that whilst this buff-breasted sandpiper is from the Americas, these turnstones, which are kind of we consider to be from the east, but this friend was saying that actually, when you think about it, on their breeding grounds in the high Arctic, they're only a few hundred miles distant from each other, which is quite incredible when you think about it. And here they are feeding on the same bit of Northumberland coastline, when one should be several thousand miles away and heading south into South America, and the other one's heading down into Africa, or perhaps just into Europe. But to think where they're bred actually is so close, but they should have completely different migration routes, but they've ended up quite close to here. But it's really sort of caught a lot of people's imagination, this bird. It's because it's so pretty, really, and it's so approachable. But these birds need to feed to continue their onward migration, because without that fuel they wouldn't make it. But there we are. It's just shows that what a melting pot this our coastline can be, and you're never sure what you're going to find at any given time out there. So yeah, it's worth watching. And I was thrilled to bits to get a chance to see this bird, and sitting with watching it was just quite a thrill, because it was quite approachable. And of course, as the tide was coming in, it was pushing these birds closer and closer and closer, and the waves would break over, and they would be sort of just covered by the sea, and it was just a great turmoil, and they were just so just sort of trying to find some food to eat. And there's lots there, of course, as I've already mentioned. But it's great. For me, waders, the family is just wonderful, and it's a great sort of a great family to get into. And I'm thrilled. Brilliant stuff. So yes, next time, just watch out what's going out on the shore. There's lots of interesting birds there.
I think it's time to pop over to Tom's again for some jobs for the week in the garden. Over to you, Tom Pattinson.
These are the jobs I'll be dealing with next week, hopefully. First and foremost is the bulb planting. If you want any bulbs to brighten up your Christmas period, now is the time to start planting them up in bowls. I'm talking mainly of hyacinths, and hyacinths and ordinary hyacinths are those that have been prepared. They cost a little bit more, but you can buy them at the garden centre now. 3 or 5 or 7 to a bowl, a large bowl if you wish, and they're put into growth now, and they go into the garage or somewhere dark and cold, frostproof if possible, and they develop a root system over several weeks, say about 8 weeks, and then you gradually bring them into the light, wean them into the daylight about 3 weeks before Christmas, and you can have them flowering for Christmas. The whole process about 8 to 10 or 11 weeks. It's lovely if you have some hyacinths ready for Christmas in bowls. Fragrance and white, pink, blue, etc. That's one of the things I'm doing. I'd add to those, by the way, I have Narcissus, daffodil, paper white, which is white, of course, and highly fragrant, and that's my favourite for planting in pots. Now, only those pots just stay on the greenhouse bench, and the bulbs develop naturally in the moderate temperature of an unheated greenhouse. So they go alongside. You can either just put a few bulbs into one pot, or you can build them up in 2 or 3 layers in a large pot, a double layer or triple layer. But they can be ready for Christmas as well. Add a bit of sparkle to the occasion. That's one of the things I'm doing. I am growing potatoes for Christmas as well. So this is about 2 Christmas treats, the bulbs and the potatoes, which you harvest and they taste so fresh for Christmas dinner. Looking ahead, good planning ahead. I have just last call, I would say, for planting second cropping potatoes. I've just planted some Nicola, Charlotte and Maris Pear, second crop. They've been held back and they're now ready to grow. I've got some growing on, some just planted. Potatoes need, generally speaking, about 10 weeks from planting to to digging up and consuming. So they can't stay outside. I have some outside in containers that have been growing recently on. They're getting a decent, reasonable size now. I'm going to move them into the unheated greenhouse where they can have the light, and they'll have frost-free in there at the moment anyway, and they'll just grow on in there. And I'll have them to harvest for Christmas. I'm also starting what I call my salvage operation. It's quite a process that lasts for several weeks. It's looking around the borders and seeing any plants that have got cuttings, material that would root, say little softwood or semi-hardwood stem cuttings on. For example, the penstemons, I see they have some stem cuttings on at the moment. I'll be taking some of those for sure. There's a hebe as well, which has still got soft enough stems to root. Anything of that nature, I'm taking those cuttings now. It's a bit of an insurance policy against the parent plant dying off in winter, but penstemons are pretty hardy these days. They used to be not so tough, but now there's a hardy breed and can stand a bit of frost. But I still take some cuttings, which increases the stock for next year. I'm taking those stem cuttings at the moment and looking around anything else that's frost tender, because I know we shouldn't be probably talking about frost on the threshold of October, because it generally remains frost-free throughout October. But this is a long process of gradually salvaging what you can from the garden, anything that's a perennial, that has a question mark hanging over its hardiness or its ability to survive winter. I either propagate it in one way or another, or I'm prepared to dig it up and move it into the unheated greenhouse, which needs to be a bit like TARDIS by the time I've collected everything together I need. But there you are. These are the things I'm starting off as jobs for this weekend. Enjoy your gardening.
You've been listening to gardener Tom Pattinson, birder Tom Cadwallander from the British Trust for Ornithology, and Steve Lowe from the Northumberland Rivers Trust and Naturally Northumbria. I'm Carl Steinson, and do check out our Twitter and Facebook page, the Nature Garden. You'll find them under that. And our website, The Nature Garden Notebook. That's The Nature Garden Notebook, all one word, .com. And we'll be back in 2 weeks' time. In the meantime, enjoy your garden and nature. Bye for now.